My name's Nat at Exceptional Individuals. We are a social enterprise that supports people find interesting work and also organizations become more inclusive. This is a really interesting subject, particularly one that is very close to my heart because it is a massive shortfall when it comes to support, understanding, and knowledge in people who do not represent stereotypical male and white male. This is why we're doing today. We're doing a little bit of a deep dive to see, hey, are there differences? If there are differences in male and female, what are they? Are there different support mechanisms? Today, we are predominantly talking about dyslexia. However, what we're talking about today can work across all of them, to be honest, because it's the same things that crop up time and time again. Underdiagnosis, potential different stigmas, all of that stuff. Here's me, not a woman, but I will do my absolute best to represent and talk about it from a balanced perspective. Again, I am here to facilitate with the science and to help lead a discussion, but it's a lot of your experiences that I'm going to be drawing very heavily on today. Here's ourselves, here's me, here's April, and we do have Jess. We have a very diverse workforce, lots of great experiences to draw upon. The last webinar we have uploaded is OCD in pop culture, dyslexia in women. In current day, I think it's always good to define what I mean as a woman in today. If you are non-binary or resonate as a woman, the truth is there isn't much data on it at all. I'm going to be looking at biological women in particular, just because there is more data, more understanding, not meaning I'm discrediting anyone. It's just what we can actually research on at the moment. However, there may be some overlaps, particularly when we look at the cultural element opposed to the biological. But what are we actually going to be learning today? If successful, we're going to be learning about the prevalence and diagnosis. How likely are women to be dyslexic, particularly opposed to the male counterparts? We're going to be looking at the brain difference. Are our brains wired differently in regards to dyslexia? If you've got two juicy brains, one male, one female, both with dyslexia, would you be able to tell the difference? We're going to look at how culture can and societal expectations can affect how people are seen, supported, and understood. Some challenges faced by women in particular, some support strategies, all well and good talking about all the difficulties. Pretty good to talk about some of the ways we can overcome some of them. We're going to look at some research, how much research is actually being done in male-female differences. As I said, let's actually go back a little bit because dyslexia is a medical term to talk about a particular diagnosis. I think it's good to break the word down. First of all, dys. Dys just means different or difficulty in. Dyslexia, lexia as in lexicon, reading, difficulty in reading. Simple as that. That is way more to dyslexia than reading. But the way we typically diagnose things is we take the characteristic, which is the one we discover first, or we do the characteristic which seems most prevalent. A good example of this is you've got traits of obsessive compulsive disorder. You might be put on antidepressants. You might be like, well, I'm not depressed. You don't have to be. The reason they're called antidepressants is because that's what they were originally created for or originally used for. Things can take different meanings after which. Do not let the names fool you. They do give you a starting point. There are also other ones like dyscalculia, dysgraphia, dyspraxia, but as mentioned, we're not going to focus as much on them today, but the kind of overall message will be quite similar for all of them. What is dyslexia? Dyslexia is split up between how you read. Typically, you read different to how the education system teaches you, so there may be challenges involved, particularly in early ages of education. There might be difficulties in spelling. That does overlap with a condition called dyscalculia, but honestly, there's a lot of overlaps with all of them. There's also phonological awareness, so how you pronounce words. It is a neurodevelopmental condition, meaning you are born with it or developed very early on in your life. It is with you for life. Dyslexia is a learning disorder. Disorder sounds negative. It's just the word they use. That makes reading difficult. Remember, difficult doesn't mean impossible. It just means that you spend a little bit more time in order to overcome some of the barriers that society has put in place, even if it's unintentional. While it does affect men and women, it affects us all. It can show up differently in women. We often talk about the difference in male and female when we talk about ADHD, because that is more prominent. Dyslexia, not going to lie, it is a little bit more subtle, but the differences are still there. Women may show different dyslexia patterns due to compensatory strategies. What we're saying here is the way we deal with it, or the way you deal with it, might be different, so it looks different. Out of here, dyslexia is dyslexia. We don't have subtypes. However, I like unofficial subtypes. These unofficial subtypes are quite useful because they show you that dyslexia can demonstrate itself in a multiple of ways. Some of them could be focal, predominantly around how you speak and read. Surface could be face value, how the eyes interpret it. It's the brain that interprets it, but you get it. Directional, B's and D's. Rapid naming deficits could be difficulty with quick retrieval. Double deficit, meaning you've got multiple of these. Visual, all of these are just different ways. Surface dyslexia, in terms of how the brain sees it, interprets it, and reads it, has been seen to be more common in women. But please do know, not official terms, but I do think they can be useful, particularly if you just say the word dyslexia, it's quite generic. There are going to be some new terms today, and I think it's always good to just make sure we're all on the same page. You may know them, may not know them. Let's look. Logical processing. Phonological is a fun word to say, but all it means is the sound structure. But is how we pronounce the words and the makeup of them. Surface dyslexia struggles with whole word recognition. Let's look here. You might see the word dyslexia and struggle with the whole word. Someone with phonological will be like dyslexia and struggle with the pronunciation, particularly with hidden words. Remember, we said women are more likely to have surface dyslexia. More likely doesn't mean only. Then we've got compensatory strategies. All that means is if you hit a road, you'll find another way around it. And that is compensating for that big block that you have faced. Hormonal influences, it's no secret. There's different hormones in male and female, particularly females. As the body changes, you get an increase, a decrease, goes up and down, and they can affect in many different ways. That can have an impact on dyslexia in terms of how it affects you. Doesn't mean it comes and goes. It just means that sometimes it will be more obvious than others. Self-esteem issues, that's not a biological one. That's a environmental one. Unfortunately, depression, the anxiety, they come quite hand in hand. Social pressures, you might find where males are expected to fail in education with dyslexia, women or girls, they have higher expectations to do well, to be gifted, to not misbehave. There's those additional pressures. Societal, brain functions, that is just looking at how the brain works, how it controls pattern recognition. Diagnostic challenges, that's when we observe someone and we're like, you have that. But if you have that, but present it in a different way, the likelihood of getting a diagnosis plummets as well. Then interventions is ways we support people, but personalized interventions are how we support people in a more customized way. This little iceberg here is quite useful because when we think of dyslexia, we think of reading. But there's way more to dyslexia than reading. It can affect attention, visual processing, emotional impact, compulsory strategies, processing speed, memory, rapid naming, and focal processing, among many. Let's go and look about how likely are we to have dyslexia. Let's start with a broad view first, and then we'll narrow it down to females, women in particular. Dyslexia is about 1 in 10. That's the general one. But that is mostly based on males. I just want to know, do you have dyslexia? Yes or no? Depending on what you'll say, might skew my results a little bit. But it's important to know that more people have it than are dying. I'm not trying to encourage you to get diagnosis. It's just worth noting that as our audience is majority female, maybe the likelihood is there's going to be a different representation. What is your biological sex, or whatever sex you want to use to be fair, female or male? Where are the males today? I will say this is something that does slightly gripe me. Let's say you're attending an event for LGBT. Why is it only people who are gay that attend? If we're doing an event for Black Lives Matter, why is it only Black people? For a lot of things that we want to gain awareness for, it's the person who doesn't resonate with it who arguably definitely needs to be there way more. It's a shame we don't have any males today. However, this is being recorded, will be uploaded, so fingers crossed it will be making more of an impact. Interestingly, there's quite a fair makeup on whether they have dyslexia, don't have dyslexia, or not sure. We know that dyslexia is diagnosed 3 times more often in males opposed to females. Why do you think this is? We've already said a few reasons. Are there any other reasons you may think of? 3 times. I can't do the math, but that's a considerable amount. We got masking, coping strategies. Yep, masking is a very common one. If when you fake being neurotypical, men get paid more attention to, men get paid more, they get more attention, they just get everything. It's not fair. It really isn't. It's something that we've got to become more aware of, particularly teachers, educators. We've got lack of awareness of dyslexic females. If I was to ask you to name famous dyslexics, I reckon you could name all the males. But if I asked you to do the same for females, I reckon that this would be obvious. Male bias in medicine. Yep. The way medicine has always been focused towards males. Men are more loud and expressive. I don't know about that, but definitely in some instances. Definitely in my case, it was due to coping strategies and masking, less awareness in schools, less obvious signs. The signs are less obvious, but maybe it's because they aren't the signs we are looking for. These are all true. Bad boys. The key reason is boys are bad. Can't really dice it any other way. Yeah, boys are more likely to be disruptive, more likely to have behavioral issues. And if you're a teacher and Jimmy's climbing on the ceiling, you'd probably want to get support for that. But if a girl was just keeping to herself, not struggling, but keeping it quiet, she could stay in the class and won't get any additional support. It really does come down to that. Why are boys more disruptive? Again, a little bit of biology, a little bit of environmental factors, hormones. There are a few reasons. Females mask more. Absolutely. Moving on from some bad boys, let's look at the diagnostic manual. There's different ways we get diagnosed. Mostly it's related to the DSM, Statistical Manual of Mental Health Disorders, version 5, or it's the International Clarification of Disease from the ICD-11. These books are not perfect. They're the best we got, but they are by far not perfect. The biggest issue, in my humble opinion, is they do not take cultural or gender differences into consideration. They are very black and white. You have ABC, regardless of your social economic background or religion or race or any of that. Do you have it? Yes or no? Depending on what you are uncertain, you either get diagnosed or you do not. Joy says women, when I was growing up, weren't necessarily expected to have an academic career. That's not true. Women have had a lot to overcome. For instance, not being able to vote, being expected to stay at home. All of these factors would mean the likelihood of someone noticing any learning differences would be far diminished. How we have diagnosed people over time has changed. So let's have a look at some basic history of the DSM. I've just created one of these for the ICD, but wasn't quite ready to go live yet. Back in the 50s, were dyslexia not included? No one's getting diagnosed with it. In the late 60s, still not included. Yet being gay was included. That was a disorder. You can see how messed up this was. Yeah, it's not. That's what it said. Then in the 80s, we've got developmental reading disorder. You know what? That sounds like dyslexia. Let's face it, the name's not as catchy, but it's in there. Then in the revision, yep, still in there. Then we just call it a reading disorder. They get rid of developmental. That's interesting. Now we've got specific learning disorder. You'll notice that we're not using dyslexic as a particular term because things like dyslexia, dysgraphia, dyscalculia, they all count as specific learning disorders. That's different to things like autism and ADHD because they are conditions which affect everything, where a specific learning disorder is something which affects a very particular element of your life, normally related to work or education. In the particular context of reading, that's a disorder. But if you're just out with friends playing tennis, probably not going to be a disorder. Where things like ADHD or autism arguably do follow you around no matter what you do. Let's look at some brain differences. How different are the brains? We know that there are different hormones, different chemicals, but what about actually how the brain looks, the kind of makeup of it? Truth be told, more research is needed. There has been some research, so let's dive in. I want to know though, what do you think? Why are there differences in male and female? Do you think it's mostly genetic, environmental, or a little bit of both? Genetic meaning it's part of your DNA. There is a biological difference to why men and women are different. Environmental is more about where you grew up, the support you got, social stigmas, everything which is added to you later on. It is both, but until recently, most people thought it was only environmental and not genetic. It's the same. You've got a brain, it looks like a brain, you can't see any differences. We are starting to see differences though, as more research develops and progresses. There should be noted that there is a difference between sex and gender. I'm guilty of it. I use them interchangeably sometimes. I think we all do, but it's useful to know that there are differences. Sex is, okay, I always got to be careful not to muddle these up, is the biological side of it. We've got your chromosomes. Are you X or Y or XX? That's the fact. Reproductive organs. What bits and bobs do you have? Is also sex. Hormones, the type of chemicals you have in your body, estrogen, testosterone, depends on your gender. There are always some misnomers or red herrings, or there's always people who don't fit the mold. But more often, gender, and that is a cultural construction. That is something which we created. For instance, men do construction. That's a gender attribution. Are more risk, more aggressive. Maybe a little bit of both, but more often that is what's expected. Women are more likely to be caring, sensitive, more fragile, potentially inferior in healthcare, financially more likely to be dependent. These things, they both have an impact. Let's start off with biological, but then let's look at gender. This is quite a good little illustration. I made this once. I was quite happy with it. This shows you where dyslexia comes from. Because with these things, we're still learning a lot, but we know that it's a combination of external influences. This is environment and genetics, your DNA. External are things that we gain once we are born. Genetic are things that we are given as we come out and we're ready. It could be your education. Could that impact whether or not you have dyslexia? It definitely could impact how the dyslexia affects you and whether or not you get support strategies early on. Socioeconomic factors. If you go to a school which is really bad, not much funding, the likelihood that your dyslexia will be untreated in terms of support will be a lot higher, or lack of getting a diagnosis. Genetics is heritable, meaning it runs in the family. So if your parents have it, your grandparents, you're more likely to. Then chromosomal changes. If it runs in your DNA, it's there. A lot of the time is different chromosome changes will determine whether or not you have dyslexia. But if you want to know what chromosome in particular, you're out of luck. What it looks like is there isn't a particular one gene. It's more likely to be lots of common genes that are all slightly different that equal it. Doesn't matter if it's internal or external. How it eventually manifests itself is reading, writing, coherence, language processing, memory difficulties. This is what we see. When we look at psychology, we are focusing on the manifestation. We are looking at what we can see. If we want to understand more about the genetics, then that is going to require science to get a little bit more advanced, or at least a little bit cheaper. The everyday person will be able to find out. On this one, nice and simple. I want you to rank where you think the biggest impacts dyslexia has on women. And I know there's 8, way too many. Rank them in terms of, yep, that has the biggest impact. This has the least impact. Right, we've got hormones, brain differences, reading skills, compensating, sounds like money, self-esteem, social pressure, diagnostic challenges, or personalized. Self-esteem is quite high. Self-esteem, I could see that, essentially how you see yourself. And I can imagine that could vastly impact it. Societal pressures to be a certain way, to be a certain level of ability, to be able to do certain tasks. Diagnostic challenges, yet we know that they are a bit more challenging. Brain differences, particularly on the hormone side. Reading skills, girls are better readers than males. They learn to read a lot sooner, and that can often mean they do not get as much attention because you'll see age ranges grouped together, even though we all develop different ages. Let's have a look at the brain. There are differences, not lots of studies, as you'll soon see. There are some studies. Boys have more grey matter in a brain, but white matter, grey matter. Essentially, it just means like how near to the edge it is. It's not actually grey or white. It's the bit under the crinkles. Sensory and motor areas. Less grey matter in sensory/motor areas, but boys have more grey matter in the sensory and motor areas, but less in language areas in girls. That's really interesting. Depending on the hormones, there will be either more or less matter, which is essentially the amount of neurons together really tightly. There is a difference that does have an effect, but we still have a lot more research to do. Some differences is males are diagnosed more frequently, more severe symptoms due to noticeable language-related difficulties. Because males are more likely to struggle with language difficulties, which is quite easily to observe, they're more likely to get support as well as behavioral. Females, on the other hand, are more likely to find ways around it, or at least to mask it or to hide it. Because males develop faster, they are more likely to come up with strategies where their male counterparts are still trailing behind. If you're comparing them to each other, the males need more help. Girls just needed help earlier on, or they needed different type of help. Different brain patterns with less grey matter in sensory and motor areas. This little image here, while not overly relevant, it does show you how dyslexia can be different. For instance, you can get dyslexia through strokes or trauma. It can affect you more on surface. Interestingly, we know women with dyslexia are more likely to have surface dyslexia, which is more common through stroke or trauma. Just because it's more common, that does not mean that's how the individual ended up with dyslexia. More often than not, it is developmental, but the phonologic side is more common in males. We often look at one particular element of dyslexia without understanding that it actually can affect you in many. Let's look at some culture, because that plays a really big part. These are things that you're not born with. You're not born with culture, but the second you are in this life, you are being influenced by the people, the music, the sounds, the clothes, the food, everything around you is having an impact. On this one, what I want you to do is slide left if you think this is something which is more noticeable in boys, or slide right if it is more noticeable in girls. I appreciate it's a bit small, so I'll read it out. The first one is, where are dyslexic symptoms more noticeable? Do you think they're more noticeable in boys or girls? We've answered this already, but this is your personal opinion. Where are disruptive behaviors more common in dyslexia? Who's more likely to kick up a fuss? Who do teachers identify more easily with dyslexia? You'll notice so far, these are all cultural. They shouldn't have to be this way, but a lot of it is how we visualize it. Who faces more pressure to hide dyslexia and perform academically? Who has more language-related brain issues with dyslexia? Or who are parents more proactive in seeking dyslexic diagnosis? The surprise. Yeah, boys, girls, a little bit of a mix. Boys. More often than not with most things, boys are more likely. I think the more we understand this, the more we can be more conscious about it, and the more likely we can seek support. If you're a parent, speak to your teachers, ask them about their experiences with dyslexic girls in the classroom. If you are getting a diagnosis, make sure the person diagnosing you also has a lot of experience with women as well as male. Do not take it for granted, because the way most people are trained is from a male perspective. Out of curiosity, when were you diagnosed? If you were like, Nat, I wasn't diagnosed, I don't have dyslexia. What age was the person, your child or a family member, someone close to you? When were they diagnosed? We don't have any males to counteract this, but if we did, it would be very likely that males would be diagnosed much earlier on, typically before 16, where women, interestingly, are a lot later. A lot of the time, they are getting diagnosed later in life. Any of you who got diagnosed with dyslexia later in life, what made you do it? Did you want to do it for your own well-being? Did you do it because someone in your family, maybe a child had it? It's interesting to know, why are more people finding out later in life that they have something which should have been picked up in childhood? Or Marcella says university. Yeah, universities are pretty good on the whole about finding it. Kate says, I was diagnosed at 21 as part of an assessment getting to university. If you went to education, you're more likely to get a diagnosis. But maybe if university wasn't the route you were going in, maybe less likely. Let's look at some school practice now. How do people get treated differently in the school system? Philippa says, diagnosed at 30 after years of just being told I did not try hard enough and was lazy. I'm sorry to hear that. Unfortunately, that is something we hear time and time again. I was incorrectly assessed at school age, wanted to revisit this. Just because someone diagnosed you, remember, psychology is very much a personal opinion. While they do have criteria to follow, one person will have a different view to another person. If you are someone who has only diagnosed white males, you will have a particular bias when you're diagnosing female from, say, non-white background, or it could be anything like that. April says, when my cousin was 12, there was a local news article about publishing a story. Although she's 3 now, I don't know how old she was. Naomi says, when my daughter was diagnosed, I noticed similarities in my life. That's quite often. You'll say, someone will get a report saying this person has these characteristics. You'll be like, wait a second, that's me as well. But Joy says, I was a teacher at university and my students were getting diagnosed with dyslexia and getting lots of help. I recognized I had some struggles as then. Some of the same. I hit the wall when requiring to mark 30 plus papers one evening, and I just do it. It is a shame that a lot of us find out we may have something by the time we're at crisis point. If you have the strategies in place and the support available earlier on, you may have not hit that brick wall. Maybe they could have eased the amount of work you had in one go. Maybe there could have been different support strategies in While it's great, a lot of you understand now and have support available, I'm pretty certain it would have knocked your self-esteem. It would have in some shape or when you were at school, though, I'm curious to know what set you were in. Were you in the bottom set for those who really struggled? Were you in the middle set or were you in the top set? Due to our demographic today, this isn't going to be overly useful, but what you typically find is males tend to be in the bottom sets and girls tend to be in a higher set. If you're in a higher set, you are deemed to not need as much support as the bottom sets. But a lot of the time, you're able to mask it or find strategies. Do not let whatever set you or your children are in dictate whether or not you should qualify for support. Remember, dyslexia is a specific learning difference. It's about particular instances. While you maybe find some areas, there will be particular scenarios where additional support would be very much valued. Different for different subjects. Okay, but in the bottom may have been hidden as I was very left-handed and wanted to read from right to left. Still do prefer writing from left to right. Yeah, that is very common actually. You are more likely to be left-handed if you're neurodivergent. Across everything, I'm with you on that. I was also bottom for everything. These are general patterns. Of course, it varies. Cultural influences. This is historical, how people have been treated in the past, both locally in terms of your family as well as your whole country. Geographical, different places on Earth have very different views on what is considered normal and what isn't. If you couldn't read or write 500 years ago in Southeast Asia, do you think that was a disability? No, that was completely normal. It was expected. The only reason it's no longer acceptable is because everyone is expected to read. That is a cultural expectation. We've got familiar factors, how your family sees you, what they consider normal, what they consider atypical. For our well-being, we are predominantly focused on the social and psychological today, but there is also the biological element, which we don't often take into consideration. But it's three of these which equal your well-being. And psychology typically does forget to do a good job at looking at the biological side as well as the social side. So you're only going to get one part of it, not a real representation. Let's have a little look at the cultural bias. This is why people think straight away due to years and years of the same thought process. We've got stereotypes. Dyslexics, bad at reading, not able to read, is often stereotyped as predominantly affecting boys. If I was to ask the average person to picture someone in your head who has dyslexia, more often than not, I guarantee they'd be depicting a male, unless they particularly was close with someone who was female who had dyslexia in their life. It was often masked. Masking is a really big thing. You don't want to cause a fuss. You don't want to be standing out. You want to be able to blend in, just get by in life. A lot of the time you will put on a facade, a mask, in order to just get by. That can, of course, have difficulties later on, because if you get support early on, those challenges may diminish or might not just be there. But if you hide it, you'll always be working against it. What are some challenges that are particularly faced for women? We're looking more on the social side of things. Think about the workplace. What type of challenges do you think are more distinct to women? We talked about school and education, but what about in everyday life? Philippa says, I used both hands until I was 8, and then told to choose, but it was suggested I was right-handed. Yeah, right-handed will always be the preference because that is the dominant hand for the majority of people, and life is just easier. But it shouldn't have to be that way. There's nothing wrong with left-handed people. It's just because they're not the majority, less things are developed for them. What workplace and societal challenges do women face? You've got women are traditionally in clerical roles, meaning problems with reading or typing will be significant. If you think of Mad Men, the typical woman is in all those secondary supportive roles, which are more required to do those things. Outdated, of course, but it's how it was often depicted. Expected to be good at organization. Yep, the traditional good housewife. These things, they do ripple through history. We might say them now and know they're wrong, but if you would truly ask yourself, they are very much embedded. Some challenges include workplace discrimination. Women with dyslexia face a double disadvantage from gender bias and fear of disclosing the diagnosis. Let's face it, gender bias is a really big thing. Dyslexia is just another whammy on top. It makes something which is already difficult extra hard. This is when we talk about intersectionality, that it's not normally just one thing individual, that how people treat you and their understanding of you and how you view yourself. It's normally a combination of different factors. We've got educational delays. Many women are diagnosed late, as we've already seen today, missing early educational support. The earlier you get support, the more likely you will overcome those challenges and be successful later in life. It pays to be a bit disruptive, particularly early on. Before we move on to support strategies, Emma says, in most workplaces today, everything is on screens, meaning less verbal communication for people who struggle with writing and reading. Yeah, you're less likely to have those open conversations. The things you struggle with are more likely to be more prominent, more expected. We've talked about a lot of challenges. I want to hand it over to you. What do you think of things which can support a woman with dyslexia? Of course, tell me any generic things, but are there things which in particular could really benefit with it? Things that maybe we don't do because it wouldn't be useful to men. Hard question to answer, but if any comes to mind, do let me know. We've got support communities. Yep. If you know there are other people like you, you can have an honest and open conversation. You want to see yourself represented and know that you're not an outlier. Coaching. Yep. Lots of coaching. I highly recommend though, asking your coach, do they have experience with women, those with women with dyslexia in particular, because they may feel the need to give you advice which has worked for other people, but might very work for you. Mentoring, also very similar. Awareness, tech, mixed experience. Technology is really useful, but it has to be the right thing for you. And it has to integrate seamlessly with your day-to-day life for you to implement it effectively. Mentors in education, support communities, coaching, awareness. Awareness in workplace, such as courses. Yes, tailored education, courses which are made for you, rather than ones which are just slightly adapted. Or use AI to help with text. Yep, AI can be very useful. I think it's a godsend for a lot of us ND folk. Other effective interventions could be early screening, making sure that people get the screenings early on. Because the earlier you get support, the earlier you can come up with the right strategy. And the earlier you can save self-esteem and your self-worth. The longer you're struggling with, the lower your opinion may be of yourself. We've got multi-sensory approaches, methods like the Orton-Gilliam engage multiple senses. You know what that approach is? I won't go into it too much now, but by making sure that you learn auditory, visual, kinesthetic, essentially all your different senses that you're utilizing them and really help someone. Quite often we tailor towards senses which are more dominant in males and women. If you are creating presentations or designing work, make it more engaging. Assistive technology, tools like text-to-speech and speech recognition can be really useful. I will, however, say they're only good if you use them and if you practice on them. If you just get them and barely use it, they're not going to be effective. We've got a good line manager. Yes, Joy. I think a good line manager is crucial. Hard to know whether or not they're a good line manager though before you start a job. Regular meetings to prioritize workloads. Yep. Have someone who balances out your spiky profile. Awareness for other colleagues. Asking the person what support they need. Ding, ding. Yeah, just speak to the person. All of these strategies provided in the workplace. They should be. Occupational health assessments. Yep. Not all jobs have occupational health. A lot of occupational health therapists aren't specialists in dyslexia. However, they may know someone who is, or they're still a good starting. And I believe this is the final section, the importance of gender-specific research. So how important is it that we're doing research on women or males or particular demographic? If you were to go on PubMed, and this is like Google Scholar, it's a massive database of loads of academic articles. You search for sex differences, gender differences in dyslexia. How much research has been done on it? Oh, wow. 1971, we're getting some research. We have not been researching sex differences in dyslexia for very long. If you look, it goes up and down each year, and the general trend, more or less, is going up, but we have plateaued. I know that we haven't got recent years, but I imagine it's again a very slow up. We are making progression, but it's not particularly fast. There is definitely hope for the future, but we need more people to take an interest in these studies. Do you have any thoughts or opinion why you think it's of particular use and interest to have gender-specific research? Maybe I might even expand this, not just gender, but also ones on racial backgrounds, on cultural backgrounds. Should we start being more broad? We know that our diagnostic criteria currently doesn't cater towards different elements of someone's identity, but should we be doing it? If so, why? Symptoms or behavior appear different across genders and culture. Yeah, If it's different, then surely we should be researching it. Inclusivity, it is just the right thing to do. I think also productivity. If we want to get the best out of people, we need to know how something works with them. People with experiences are being dismissed, invalidated, ignored due to gaps in knowledge and research. Yeah, oh, you don't have dyslexia or not dyslexia. It is. You just didn't know that was part of it. Raise awareness of differences between people's experiences and culture. Yep. Because women deserve to be seen and heard. Yes, Joy. We've got to have all the data to make informed decisions. That is a really good one. If we do not know something, we can't make decisions which we know to be right. I'm sure we all have our personal views on what would help someone, but unless we've got data to back it up, it's just an assumption and not a fact. Yeah, it helps understand and support. In my view, the need for targeted studies is, as most of you have already stated, customized interventions. We know that tailored support gives the best support. We know that there isn't a one size fits all and that every student is an individual. By tailoring support given, they will be able to develop and achieve their potential much earlier on. I also think future research, more studies are needed, and that is something which will only happen if we show that there is a need and a want for it. The general trend is research is happening, but it isn't happening on a large scale by any means. Probably a handful of new studies done each year. A lot of these studies are not taking multiple factors into consideration. Are we looking at only dyslexia in young girls opposed to women? Because again, how it demonstrates can be quite different or very different. The conclusion of all this chit chat is that dyslexia does manifest differently in men and women. That is a fact. It does impact diagnosis. There is a difference in brain structure. More research is definitely needed on that area. There are different support needs. Addressing these differences through targeted research and interventions is crucial for effective support. We're not talking about curing someone here. That's not how dyslexia works. It's lifelong. But we can change how we support someone. And the earlier we do that, the more likely we are setting someone up for success. If you do have dyslexia and are in the workplace in the UK, I always have to recommend workplace needs assessment. This is where you can get more support for dyslexia. Unlike diagnostic reports, which will just look at you and dyslexia, we will take gender as well as other cultural factors into consideration. Do check out our website, particularly if you're in the UK and have dyslexia. If you want to watch today's webinar later down the line, we do record them and upload them to a YouTube channel. It's nice and simple. You can go to our YouTube. Make sure you subscribe. Every day we get a few new subscribers and it fills me with lots of joy. Do check out that. If you want to get in contact, just go to exceptionalindividuals.com or drop us an email. My email is just Nat, exceptionalindividuals.com. We're more than get in touch. We are done. We are dusted, but the discussions of dyslexia and women goes on. I hope you found today useful, got a couple of gems out of it, and I really appreciate you all attending. Fingers crossed, I see you in future ones. We do them every single week. Please do get in touch. Thank you all for the lovely comments and thoughts. Always nice to read them. Have a great rest of your Thursday, everyone. Bye, everyone.